The bruise on Sarah Nolan's cheekbone had turned the color of a thundercloud by the time she stumbled into the Silver Creek saloon, her dress torn at the shoulder and her dark hair hanging loose from its pins. She had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to, and the storm gathering on the horizon promised to be as merciless as the man she had just fled from, the man who was supposed to protect her, the man who had raised his fist to her face because she dared to say no. Adam Thorne looked up from the whiskey he was nursing at the corner table, his green eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of the young woman who had just burst through the saloon doors. He had been in Piotch, Nevada for 3 weeks now, taking odd jobs and keeping to himself as he always did, but something about the desperate look in her eyes made him set down his glass and stand up. The year was 1878, and this mining town had seen its share of violence and desperation, but there was something different about this, something that made his chest tighten with an old familiar anger. "Please," Sarah said, her voice breaking as she looked around the half-empty saloon. "I need help. My father, he's going to come looking for me, and I cannot go back there." The bartender, a grizzled man named Murphy, shook his head and turned away. "Ain't none of my business what happens between a man and his daughter. You best get on home before you make things worse." Adam was across the room before he even realized he had moved. "She's bleeding," he said quietly, his hand resting on the back of the chair nearest to Sarah. "And she's asking for help." Sarah turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw a man in his mid-20s with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands that spoke of hard work and harder living. His dark blonde hair needed a trim, and there was a scar along his jawline that she found herself staring at for just a moment too long. But it was his eyes that held her attention, eyes that showed both kindness and a kind of controlled fury that made her think he understood exactly what she was running from. "My name is Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Nolan. My father is Richard Nolan. He owns the mining supply company here in town." Adam nodded slowly. He had heard the name before. Richard Nolan was a wealthy man, respected in the community, the kind of man whose word carried weight. "And he did this to you." "He wants me to marry his business partner, Marcus Greenfield," Sarah said, her words tumbling out in a rush now that someone was actually listening. "Marcus is 42 years old. He has been married twice before, and he looks at me like I am nothing more than another acquisition for his collection. I told my father I would not do it, that I would rather die an old maid than spend my life with that man, and he—" She touched her cheek gingerly, wincing. "He said I was an ungrateful girl who did not understand what was good for her. He said Marcus had paid a handsome sum for the marriage arrangement, and I would go through with it whether I liked it or not." The saloon had gone quiet now, all eyes on them. Adam felt the weight of those stares, knew that getting involved in this could bring him nothing but trouble. He had learned a long time ago to keep his head down and mind his own business. But he also remembered being young and helpless, remembered what it felt like to be at the mercy of someone bigger and stronger and meaner. "Come on," he said, making a decision that he knew might change everything. "We need to get you cleaned up, and then we need to figure out what to do next." He led her up the stairs to the small room he rented above the saloon, ignoring the knowing looks and whispered comments from the other patrons. Once inside, he poured water from the pitcher into the wash basin and handed her a clean cloth. "Here," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "Let me see that cut on your lip." Sarah dabbed at her mouth, the cloth coming away red. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not even know me." "Because it's the right thing to do," Adam said simply. He pulled out the single chair in the room and sat down, giving her space. "My father used to beat my mother. I was too small to stop him back then, but I swore when I got older that I would never stand by and watch someone hurt a woman, not if I could do something about it. The thunder rumbled outside, closer now, and Sarah moved to the window to look out at the darkening sky. "He will come looking for me," she said. "My father, he has men who work for him. They will search every building in this town." "Then we will not be in this town," Adam said. He stood and began gathering his few belongings, shoving them into his worn saddlebag. "There's a storm coming, a bad one by the look of those clouds. Most folks will have the sense to stay indoors. We can use that to our advantage." Sarah turned to stare at him. "You would do that? Run away with me into a storm? You got a better idea?" Adam asked, meeting her eyes steadily. "Because from where I am standing, your choices are pretty limited. You can go back to your father and marry the man he chose for you, or you can trust me to get you somewhere safe." She had known this man for all of 15 minutes, had no reason to believe he was any different from the other rough men who drifted through Piatch looking for work or trouble or both. But there was something in his face, in the careful way he moved around her, that made her think she could trust him. And really, what other choice did she have? "Where would we go?" she asked. "Austin," Adam said. "It's about 150 miles northwest of here, a good-sized town. You could start over there, find work maybe, or I could wire my sister in Sacramento and see if she could help. But first we have to get out of Piatch, and we have to do it now, before your father realizes where you are." Sarah nodded, her decision made. "I have nothing but the clothes on my back," she said. "My father, he will probably burn everything I own when he discovers I am gone." "Then we will get you new clothes," Adam said. He handed her his jacket, a worn canvas coat that smelled of leather and wood smoke. "Put this on. It's about to rain hard, and that dress won't keep you warm." They made it down the back stairs and to the livery stable just as the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Adam saddled his horse, a sturdy roan gelding named Redfield, and helped Sarah mount up behind him. She hesitated for just a moment before wrapping her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. "Hold on tight," Adam said. "This is going to be rough." He was not exaggerating. By the time they cleared the edge of town, the storm had unleashed its full fury. Rain came down in sheets, so thick Sarah could barely see 3 feet in front of them. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Redfield snorted and tossed his head but kept moving forward, trusting Adam to guide him through the darkness. Sarah pressed her face against Adam's back, her fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt as the wind tried to tear her from the saddle. She had never been so cold, so wet, so terrified in her entire life. But beneath the fear was something else, something that felt almost like hope. For the first time in months, she was not trapped in her father's house, not counting down the days until she would be forced to marry Marcus Greenfield. She was free, even if that freedom came with the price of uncertainty and danger. They rode for hours through the storm, following a trail that Adam seemed to know by instinct rather than sight. Finally, when Sarah thought she might actually fall from the horse from sheer exhaustion, Adam pulled Redfield to a stop in front of what looked like an abandoned mining shack. "In here," he shouted over the roar of the rain. He dismounted and helped Sarah down, then led Redfield under the narrow overhang that served as a poor excuse for a stable. "It's not much, but it will keep us dry." Inside, the shack was dark and musty, but it was blessedly dry. Adam found an old lantern and managed to coax it to life, casting a warm, golden glow over the single room. There was a fireplace in one corner, and Adam set about building a fire from the dry wood that someone had left stacked against the wall. Sarah stood shivering by the door, watching him work. Now that the immediate danger had passed, Now that she had a moment to think, the reality of what she had done began to sink in. She had run away from home. She had left behind everything she had ever known her entire life because she refused to marry a man she despised. And she had done it all with the help of a stranger, a cowboy who had no reason to risk himself for her. "Here," Adam said, draping a dusty blanket around her shoulders. "Sit by the fire. You need to get warm." She sank down onto the rough wooden floor, pulling the blanket tight around her body. Adam sat across from her, his own clothes soaked through, and began pulling off his boots. "We will stay here until the storm passes," he said. "Then we will head north. With luck, your father will think we went south toward Hiko or west toward Tanapa." "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked again. "You could get in serious trouble for helping me. My father has influence in this territory. He could make life very difficult for you." Adam was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "Like I said, I have my reasons," he finally replied. "But maybe, to be completely honest, part of it is that I saw you standing there in that saloon, and I saw myself. Not literally, of course, but I saw someone who was trapped and desperate and out of options. And I figured if I did not help you, I would spend the rest of my life wondering what happened to you, wondering if I could have made a difference." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had cried enough today. "Thank you," she said softly. "I know those are just words, and they cannot possibly express what I feel right now, but thank you." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain hammer against the roof and the wind howl through the cracks in the walls. Adam eventually stood and rummaged through his saddlebag, pulling out some jerky and hardtack. "It's not much," he said, handing her a share, "but it will keep you going until we can get a proper meal." Sarah bit into the jerky, finding it tough and salty but surprisingly satisfying. "Can I ask you something?" she said between bites. "Sure." "What do you do? I mean, what brought you to Piotch in the first place?" "I am a cowboy," Adam said with a slight smile. "Or at least I used to be. I worked on a ranch down in Arizona for a few years, but the owner sold the place and I found myself out of a job. I have been drifting ever since, taking work where I can find it. I did some mining here in Piotch, some carpentry, even helped build the new schoolhouse on the west side of town." "Do you have family?" Sarah asked. "A sister in Sacramento, like I mentioned," Adam said. "Emma. She is married to a banker, has 3 kids. She writes me sometimes, tells me I should settle down, find a good woman, start a family of my own." He shook his head. "But I have never been much good at staying in one place." "Maybe you just have not found the right reason to stay," Sarah said. Their eyes met across the fire, and Sarah felt something pass between them, something electric and unexpected. She looked away quickly, suddenly very aware of the fact that they were alone together in this tiny shack, that outside the storm still raged, and that she knew almost nothing about this man except that he had saved her from a terrible fate. "Tell me about yourself," Adam said, breaking the tension. "What did you do before today? Did you have dreams, plans for your life?" Sarah laughed, but it came out bitter. "My father always said a woman's only dream should be to make a good marriage and produce healthy sons. I was not allowed to have plans of my own. But if I had been given a choice." She paused, considering. "I think I would have liked to be a teacher. I love reading, learning new things. When I was younger, before my mother died, she used to tell me stories about faraway places, about cities where women could go to university and study medicine or law or literature. I used to dream about that, about being one of those women." "Why can you not still do that?" Adam asked. "Once we get to Austin, once you are safe, you could enroll in school, become a teacher like you wanted." "I have no money," Sarah said. "Everything I own, everything I might have inherited from my mother, is controlled by my father. I am completely dependent on charity now, on your charity. And while I am grateful, truly grateful, I do not know how I can possibly repay you or build any kind of life for myself. We will figure it out, Adam said with a confidence he did not entirely feel. You are smart and you are brave. Those are worth more than money in the long run. The storm continued through the night, and eventually exhaustion overtook them both. Adam insisted that Sarah take the blanket and sleep near the fire while he kept watch by the door, his rifle across his lap. But Sarah's sleep was fitful, plagued by dreams of her father's angry face and Marcus Greenfield's cold eyes. She woke to pale morning light filtering through the cracks in the walls and the smell of coffee brewing. Adam was crouched by the fire, looking tired but alert. "Morning," he said when he saw her stirring. "Storm finally passed about an hour ago. I figure we should get moving soon, put as much distance between us and Piotch as possible." Sarah sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. Every part of her body ached and her face felt swollen where her father had struck her. But she was alive and she was free, and that was more than she had dared hope for yesterday. They drank the coffee and finished the last of Adam's provisions, then set out again. The world looked different in the daylight, washed clean by the rain. The desert stretched out before them, vast and beautiful and intimidating in its emptiness. Sarah had never been outside of Piotch before, had never traveled more than a few miles from her father's house. Now she was heading into the unknown with a man she barely knew, and the thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As they rode, Adam told her about the route they would take, pointing out landmarks and explaining how to read the land. Sarah found herself fascinated by the way he noticed things she would have overlooked, the way he could look at the sky and predict the weather, or examine the ground and tell her what animals had passed through recently. "How did you learn all this?" she asked, her arms still wrapped around his waist as Redfield carried them steadily north. "My father, before he got mean," Adam said. "He was a good man when I was real young, taught me how to track and hunt and survive out here. It was the drinking that changed him, turned him into someone I did not recognize. After he died, my mother moved us to California to be near her sister. But I never forgot the lessons he taught me in those early years." They made good progress that first day, stopping only briefly to let Redfield rest and drink from a creek they crossed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Adam guided them to a small grove of cottonwood trees where they could make camp for the night. This time they had no shelter, but the weather was clear and mild. Adam built a fire and laid out his bedroll, insisting again that Sarah take it while he slept on the bare ground. "I have slept in worse places," he said when she protested. "You need your rest. We still have a long way to go." As they sat by the fire, Sarah found herself studying Adam's face in the flickering light. He was handsome in a rugged sort of way, with strong features and an honest expression. She wondered what his life had been like before he came to Piotch, what he had seen and done in his years of drifting from place to place. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said hesitantly. "Go ahead. Have you ever been in love?" Adam was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Once. Her name was Catherine. I met her when I was working on a ranch in Texas. She was the foreman's daughter, sweet and pretty and full of life. I thought we would get married, build a life together. But her father did not approve of me, said I was just a drifter with no prospects, that his daughter deserved better." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. He was probably right. "Last I heard, she married a shopkeeper in Dallas, had a couple of kids. I hope she is happy." "I am sorry," Sarah said. "Do not be," Adam replied. It was a long time ago, and anyway, maybe things happen the way they are supposed to. If I had married Catherine, I would not have been in Piach yesterday. I would not have been there to help you." Sarah felt her heart do a strange little flip at his words. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked. "I believe that we make our own fate," Adam said. "But I also believe that sometimes people come into our lives at exactly the moment we need them most. Whether you call that fate or coincidence or the hand of God, I do not know. But I am glad I was there yesterday, glad I could help you." "I am glad too," Sarah said softly. They fell into a comfortable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. As the fire burned down to embers, Sarah found herself reluctant to sleep, reluctant to end this day that had been both the worst and the best of her life. She was acutely aware of Adam sitting just a few feet away, of the way the firelight played across his features, of the gentle way he had treated her from the moment they met. She was also aware that she was developing feelings for him, feelings that went beyond simple gratitude. It was foolish, she knew. They had known each other for barely a day and a half, but there was something about him, something in the way he looked at her and spoke to her, that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. The next morning, they continued north, the landscape gradually changing as they traveled. The desert gave way to rolling hills dotted with sage and juniper. They passed through tiny settlements where suspicious eyes followed their progress, and Adam was careful to avoid any place large enough to have a telegraph office. If Richard Nolan had sent word out about his missing daughter, Adam did not want to risk being recognized. On the third day, they came upon a trading post run by a weathered woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Mrs. Dalton. She took one look at Sarah's torn dress and borrowed jacket and raised an eyebrow. "You two running from something?" she asked bluntly. Adam tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward the gun at his hip, but Sarah stepped forward, meeting the woman's eyes steadily. "My father wanted me to marry a man I did not love," she said. "Mr. Thorne here helped me escape. We are not outlaws if that is what you are worried about. We just need some supplies and then we will be on our way." Mrs. Dalton studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "I had a daughter once," she said quietly. "Married her off to a man I thought would take care of her. He beat her so bad she lost the baby she was carrying. By the time I found out what was happening, it was too late. She died from her injuries, and the law would not touch him because she was his wife, and he claimed it was his right to discipline her as he saw fit." She looked at Sarah with fierce intensity. "So no, I ain't worried about you being outlaws. Come on inside. I will see what I can do to help." She outfitted Sarah with a practical split riding skirt, a sturdy blouse, and a wide-brimmed hat to protect her face from the sun. She also sold them food supplies, ammunition, and a spare canteen at prices far below what she usually charged. "You take care of that girl," she told Adam as they prepared to leave. "She is braver than she knows." "I will," Adam promised. They rode on, and with each passing mile, Sarah felt the weight of her old life lifting from her shoulders. She was still frightened of what the future might hold, still worried that her father might somehow track them down. But she was also discovering a strength within herself that she had not known existed. She had survived her father's rage, survived a harrowing flight through a dangerous storm, and she was still standing. More than that, she was beginning to understand that her feelings for Adam were not just gratitude, or the result of close proximity under stressful circumstances. She admired him, the quiet competence with which he handled every challenge, the gentleness he showed her even when he had no reason to. She found herself noticing little things about him, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way his voice softened when he spoke to his horse, the way he always made sure she ate before he did. One evening, as they made camp in a sheltered valley, Sarah finally found the courage to speak what was in her heart. They had finished their meal and were sitting by the fire as usual, and Adam was cleaning his rifle with the same careful attention he brought to everything he did. "Adam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I tell you something?" He looked up, his green eyes reflecting the firelight. "Of course." "I know we have not known each other very long," she began, her hands twisting nervously in her lap, "and I know I am probably being foolish. But I need you to know that you have given me more than just safety, more than just a chance to escape my father. You have shown me what it means to be treated with kindness and respect. You have shown me that not all men are like my father or Marcus Greenfield. And I find myself feeling things for you that I know I probably should not feel, given the circumstances, but I cannot seem to help it." Adam set down his rifle very carefully. "Sarah," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up to meet his eyes. "I have been trying real hard not to say anything, trying to be a gentleman and not take advantage of the situation. But the truth is, I have been feeling the same way. From the moment I saw you walk into that saloon, something in me just knew that you were important, that you were going to change my life. I told myself it was just sympathy, just the instinct to protect someone who needed help. But it is more than that. It has been more than that from the start." He moved around the fire to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I think I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "And I know that is crazy, I know we barely know each other, but there it is. That is how I feel." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And I do not think it is crazy at all. I think it is the first truly sane thing that has happened to me in a very long time." Adam reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah breathed. His lips met hers softly, tentatively, as if he was afraid she might break. But Sarah leaned into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart beating beneath her palm, strong and steady and real. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I want to do this right," Adam said, his forehead resting against hers. "I want to court you properly, give you the time to be sure about this, about us. I do not want you to feel like you have to be with me just because I helped you escape." "I know the difference between gratitude and love," Sarah said firmly. "And what I feel for you is definitely love, but I appreciate that you want to take things slow. I appreciate everything about you, Adam Thorne." They held each other for a long time, watching the fire burn down and the stars come out overhead. Sarah had never felt so safe, so cherished, so completely at peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together. The remaining days of their journey to Austin passed in a blur of growing intimacy and deepening affection. They talked about everything, sharing their hopes and fears, their past disappointments and future dreams. Adam told her about his years working cattle drives, about sleeping under the stars and waking to the sound of coyotes howling in the distance. Sarah told him about her mother, about the woman who had filled her childhood with love and laughter, before dying of pneumonia when Sarah was 14. "That is when everything changed," Sarah said. "My father became consumed with his business, with making money and building his reputation. I think maybe he could not stand to be home without her, could not stand the reminders of what he had lost. So he threw himself into work and left me to be raised by our housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. She was kind to me, but it was not the same. And then when I turned 18, my father suddenly started paying attention to me again. But it was not because he loved me or missed me. It was because he saw me as a commodity, something he could use to strengthen his business connections. "He does not deserve you," Adam said fiercely. "And I swear to you, Sarah, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you feel valued and loved." They arrived in Austin on a warm afternoon in late June, having been on the road for nearly 2 weeks. The town was larger than Piach, with more substantial buildings and wider streets. Adam found them rooms in a respectable boarding house run by a kindly older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, taking care to rent separate rooms to preserve Sarah's reputation. Over the next few weeks, they began to build a life in Austin. Adam found steady work at a nearby ranch, and Sarah got a job helping at the local schoolhouse, assisting the teacher with the younger children. She loved the work, loved seeing the spark of understanding in a child's eyes when they finally grasped a difficult concept. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. In the evenings, Adam would call on her at the boarding house, and they would sit on the porch and talk or take walks through the town. He was courting her properly, just as he had promised, bringing her wildflowers he picked on his way into town, and treating her with a respect and tenderness that made her fall deeper in love with him every day. One evening, about 2 months after their arrival in Austin, Adam arrived at the boarding house looking nervous. He had shaved and put on his best shirt, and he was holding a small wooden box that he turned over and over in his hands as they sat on the porch swing. "Sarah," he said, his voice unsteady, "I know we agreed to take things slow to give you time to be sure, but I have been thinking a lot lately about our future, about what I want my life to look like, and every time I imagine it, you are there. You are always there." He dropped to one knee in front of her, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "I do not have much to offer you," Adam continued. "No fancy house, no fortune. But I can promise you that I will love you with everything I have, that I will work hard to provide for you, and that I will never, ever raise my hand to you in anger. I will spend every day trying to make you happy, trying to be worthy of the gift of your love." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band. "Sarah Nolan, will you marry me?" "Yes," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Adam slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was standing and pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her head spin. When they finally broke apart, Mrs. Patterson was standing in the doorway, beaming at them. "I had a feeling this was coming," she said. "Congratulations to you both. We will have to have an engagement party." They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the local church. Adam's sister Emma made the trip from Sacramento with her husband and children, and Sarah was touched by how warmly Emma welcomed her into the family. "I have been telling Adam for years that he needed to settle down," Emma said, hugging Sarah tightly. "I am so glad he finally found someone worth settling down for." Mr. and Mrs. Patterson stood up as witnesses, along with several of Sarah's fellow teachers from the school. It was a far cry from the elaborate society wedding her father would have planned for her marriage to Marcus Greenfield, but it was perfect in its simplicity and sincerity. As Adam slid the wedding band onto her finger, as she looked into his eyes and spoke her vows, Sarah felt a completeness she had never known before. This was what love was supposed to feel like. This was what a partnership between equals looked like. And she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice that day in the saloon, that running away with Adam Thorne had been the best decision of her life. They rented a small house on the edge of town, a modest place with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor. Adam worked long hours at the ranch, often leaving before dawn and returning after sunset, but he always had a smile for Sarah and time to hear about her day. Sarah continued teaching, And in the evenings she would prepare lessons for the next day while Adam read aloud from whatever book they were currently making their way through. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Money was tight, and there were times when they had to make difficult choices about what expenses to prioritize. Sarah missed her mother with an ache that sometimes took her breath away, wished desperately that she could share her happiness with the woman who had first taught her what real love looked like. And always in the back of her mind was the fear that her father might somehow find her, might show up one day to drag her back to Piotch and force her into the life she had fled. But Adam was always there, steady and strong and loving. When Sarah woke from nightmares about her father, Adam held her until the shaking stopped. When their roof leaked during a rainstorm and they had to put every pot and pan they owned on the floor to catch the drips, Adam made her laugh by pretending they were listening to a symphony. When Sarah came home exhausted from dealing with a particularly difficult student, Adam would massage her shoulders and remind her that she was making a difference, that she was changing lives. And slowly, gradually, Sarah's fears began to fade. She realized that her father was not coming for her, that he had either accepted her disappearance or decided that the scandal of a runaway daughter was not worth pursuing. Marcus Greenfield had probably found another young woman to add to his collection, and Richard Nolan had probably found another way to cement his business relationships. She was free, truly free, and the life she was building with Adam was entirely her own. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Adam over dinner one evening, watching his face carefully for his reaction. His eyes went wide, and then he was out of his chair and sweeping her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and protested that he was going to make her dizzy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Sarah asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Adam said. He set her down gently, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "I promise you, Sarah, I promise our child I will be a good father. I will never be like my father was, never let anger or drink turn me into someone to be feared." "I know you will not," Sarah said, covering his hand with her own. "You are the kindest, most gentle man I have ever known. Our child is lucky to have you as a father." The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from severe morning sickness for the first few months, and as she grew larger, she found it increasingly difficult to continue teaching. But Adam was attentive to her every need, rubbing her feet when they swelled, bringing her whatever strange food she was craving, talking to their unborn child every night before bed. Their son was born on a cold November morning in 1880. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when Sarah thought she might not survive it. But Adam stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. And finally, as the sun rose on a new day, their baby boy entered the world with a lusty cry. "He has your eyes," Sarah said weakly, cradling the tiny, squirming bundle against her chest. "And your nose," Adam said, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "He is perfect, Sarah. Absolutely perfect." They named him Andrew after Adam's grandfather, and he became the center of their universe. Adam proved to be a devoted father, coming home from the ranch during his lunch break just to hold his son, walking the floor with Andrew when he was fussy so Sarah could get some much-needed sleep. Sarah found that motherhood came naturally to her, and she loved watching Andrew grow and change, loved seeing glimpses of both herself and Adam in their son's developing personality. When Andrew was 6 months old, Sarah received a letter that had been forwarded from the boarding house where they had first stayed in Austin. It was from Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper who had helped raise her after her mother died. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it, afraid of what news it might contain. The letter was brief but momentous. Richard Nolan had died of a heart attack 3 months earlier. In going through his papers, Mrs. Chen had discovered that he had never changed his will, which left everything to Sarah as his only heir. The house, the business, all of his assets, they all belonged to her now. Mrs. Chen had taken the liberty of hiring a lawyer to handle the estate, and she was writing to ask Sarah where she would like the proceeds sent. Sarah sat down hard on the nearest chair, the letter fluttering from her nerveless fingers. Her father was dead. The man who had beaten her, who had tried to sell her to Marcus Greenfield, who had driven her to flee into a storm with a stranger, was gone. She did not know what to feel. There was no grief exactly, but there was a strange sort of sorrow for what might have been, for the father he could have been if he had chosen love over money. When Adam came home that evening, Sarah showed him the letter. "We could go back," she said tentatively. "We could take over the business, live in my father's house. We would be wealthy, Adam. We would never have to worry about money again." Adam read the letter carefully, then set it aside and took Sarah's hands in his. "Is that what you want?" he asked. "To go back to Piotch?" Sarah thought about it, really thought about it. The house she had grown up in, the town where everyone knew her as Richard Nolan's daughter. The memories of her mother, but also the memories of her father's anger and Marcus Greenfield's predatory interest. And then she thought about the life they had built here in Austin, the little house that was not much but was theirs, the friends they had made, the work that gave her purpose and joy. "No," she said finally. "I do not want to go back. This is our home now, Adam. Austin is where we belong. But maybe we could sell the business and the house. Maybe we could use that money to buy a little land here, build a bigger house, give Andrew brothers and sisters. Maybe I could even open my own school, teach girls who otherwise would not have the chance for an education." Adam smiled, that slow, warm smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "I think that sounds perfect," he said. "Write to Mrs. Chen and tell her to sell everything. We will build our own legacy on our own terms." And that was exactly what they did. The sale of Richard Nolan's estate brought in more money than Sarah had dared hope for. They bought 50 acres of good land just outside Austin and built a comfortable house with 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Adam left the ranch and began raising horses, discovering that he had a real talent for training them. Sarah opened a small school for girls in town, offering free tuition to those who could not afford to pay. Over the next 10 years, they filled their house with love and laughter and children. After Andrew came a daughter they named Sophie, who had Sarah's dark hair and Adam's stubborn determination. Then came twin boys, Michael and Matthew, who kept them on their toes with their boundless energy and mischief. And finally, when Sarah was 32 and convinced she was done having children, came little Emma, named after Adam's sister. Their children grew up knowing they were loved, knowing that their parents were partners who respected and cherished each other. Adam taught the boys to ride and rope, and he taught the girls too, because Sarah insisted that her daughters would know how to take care of themselves. Sarah taught all of them to read and write and think critically, to question the world around them and never accept injustice, simply because it was traditional. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Adam and Sarah stood on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The children were all inside, supposedly cleaning up after dinner but more likely getting into some sort of trouble. Sarah leaned against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him, and thought about how far they had come from that desperate flight through the storm. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked quietly, as if reading her mind. "Leaving everything behind, taking a chance on me?" Sarah turned to look at him, this man who had saved her life in every way that mattered. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me my life back, Adam. You gave me love and freedom and a family. You gave me everything." "You gave me just as much," Adam said, pulling her close. "Before I met you, I was just drifting, no purpose, no real home. You made me want to be better, to build something that would last. You made me want to put down roots." "We have good roots now," Sarah said, gesturing at the land around them, the house they had built together. "Deep roots." As the years passed, those roots grew even deeper. Andrew grew into a fine young man who surprised everyone by announcing he wanted to be a teacher like his mother. He went to university in San Francisco and came back with a degree and a wife, a smart, determined woman named Clara who shared his passion for education. They took over Sarah's school when she finally decided to retire, expanding it to include boys as well as girls. Sophie inherited Adam's love of horses and became one of the most skilled trainers in the territory, working alongside her father until she fell in love with a veterinarian named Dr. James Foster. Their wedding was a grand affair, with half the county in attendance, and Sarah cried happy tears as she watched her daughter dance with her new husband. The twins, Michael and Matthew, were inseparable throughout their childhood and remained close as adults. They went into business together, opening a general store in Austin that quickly became known for fair prices and friendly service. Both married within a year of each other, and both started families of their own, filling Sarah and Adam's house with grandchildren every Sunday for family dinners. Little Emma, the baby of the family, proved to be the most adventurous of them all. She announced at age 16 that she wanted to be a doctor, shocking everyone except her parents, who had always encouraged her to dream big. Adam and Sarah scraped together the money to send her to medical school in San Francisco, and she became one of the first female doctors in Nevada, opening a practice that served both the town of Austin and the surrounding ranches. Through it all, through the triumphs and the challenges, the joys and the sorrows, Adam and Sarah remained devoted to each other. They grew old together, their hair turning gray and their bodies slowing down, but their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and a profound gratitude for the life they had built together. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a huge party. The house and yard were filled with people, with music and laughter and enough food to feed an army. As the sun began to set, Adam took Sarah's hand and led her away from the crowd, out to the quiet spot by the creek where they often came to talk and remember. 40 years, Adam said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I saw you walk into that saloon, scared and desperate and so brave you took my breath away. And you were the answer to a prayer I had not even known to say, Sarah replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. My father thought he could control my life, decide my fate, but he underestimated me, and he never could have imagined that his cruelty would lead me straight to you. Do you think he would be proud of what you have accomplished? Adam asked. The school, the children you have taught, the difference you have made, Sarah thought about it. I do not know, she said honestly. My father was not a man who valued the things I value. But I hope maybe, wherever he is, he understands now that the greatest legacy is not money or business success. It is the lives we touch, the love we share, the kindness we put out into the world. You have certainly done that, Adam said. Our children, our grandchildren, they all know how to love because you taught them. They all know how to be strong and kind and true because they watched you live that way every single day. We taught them together, Sarah corrected gently. Everything good in my life I share with you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the creek burble past and the sounds of the party drifting from the house. Finally, Adam said, I want you to know something, Sarah, in case I do not get to say it again. Running away with you that night, risking everything to help you escape, it was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and if I had to live my life over again, I would not change a single moment of it. I feel the same way, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. I love you, Adam Thorne. I have loved you from the moment you stood up for me in that saloon, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. They kissed, a gentle, tender kiss that held 40 years of love and commitment and shared joy. And as they walked back to the house hand in hand, surrounded by the noise and warmth of the family they had created together, Sarah felt nothing but gratitude for the storm that had brought her to this man, for the courage that had allowed her to run away from the life others had planned for her, and for the love that had sustained her through everything that came after. Adam lived to be 74 years old, dying peacefully in his sleep with Sarah holding his hand. She mourned him deeply, feeling like a part of her own soul had been torn away. But she was not alone in her grief. Their children surrounded her with love, their grandchildren brought her comfort, and the community they had helped build rallied around her. Sarah lived for another 8 years after Adam's death, long enough to see Emma become the chief of medicine at the hospital in Carson City, long enough to hold great-grandchildren in her arms, long enough to know that the life she and Adam had built together would endure. She spent those years writing down their story, wanting to make sure that future generations understood what they had overcome, what they had created together. On a warm spring morning in 1926, Sarah Nolan Thorne died at the age of 86, surrounded by the family who loved her. At her funeral, Andrew read from the memoir she had written, the story of a young woman who refused to be controlled, who fled into a storm with a cowboy who believed in her, who built a life based on love and mutual respect and unwavering commitment. My mother once told me, Andrew said, his voice breaking with emotion, that the night she ran away from her father was the night her real life began. She said that Adam Thorne did not just save her from a bad situation. He showed her what it meant to be truly loved, truly valued as a person rather than as property or a commodity. And she spent the rest of her life trying to pass that lesson on to everyone she met. The love between my parents was the foundation of our family, and it will continue to be our guiding light for generations to come. Sarah was buried next to Adam on a hill overlooking the land they had made their own. Their headstone bore a simple inscription that Sarah had chosen herself, words that summed up everything they had meant to each other. Here lie Adam and Sarah Thorne. They loved well and were well loved. Their legacy lives on. And it did. The school Sarah founded continued to educate girls for another 50 years. The horses Adam bred became known throughout Nevada for their strength and intelligence. But more than that, the example they set, the way they loved each other and raised their children and treated everyone they met with dignity and respect, that rippled outward through their family and their community in ways that could never be fully measured. Years later, Sophie's great-granddaughter, doing research for a school project, came across Sarah's memoir in the family archives. She read the whole thing in one sitting, mesmerized by the story of her great-great-grandmother's courage and the cowboy who had loved her. At the end of the memoir, Sarah had written a final message to her descendants. If you are reading this, you are part of a legacy of love and bravery. You come from a woman who refused to accept the fate others chose for her, and a man who believed that honor meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. You come from people who worked hard, who loved deeply, who built something lasting out of nothing but determination and hope. Whatever challenges you face in your own life, remember that you carry their strength within you. Remember that real love is not about control or possession. It is about partnership and respect and choosing each other every single day. Remember that you have the power to write your own story, to refuse the paths others lay out for you if they do not fit who you are meant to be. And most of all, remember that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards, that sometimes running away into the storm is exactly what you need to do to find your way home. The girl closed the memoir and looked out the window at the Nevada landscape, at the same mountains and valleys her great-great-grandparents had looked at more than 100 years earlier. And she understood, perhaps for the first time, what it really meant to be a Thorne. It meant being brave enough to choose love over security, to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult, to build a life based on values rather than expedience. The story of Sarah and Adam became a family legend, passed down through the generations. Some of the details changed with each telling, but the heart of it remained the same. A young woman who refused to be sold into a loveless marriage. A cowboy who risked everything to help her. A desperate flight through a storm that became the beginning of a great love story. And a life built together that proved, beyond any doubt, that real love was worth any price, any sacrifice, any risk. In the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not the land or the money or the success, but the lesson that love, true love, was something worth fighting for. That it was possible to build a partnership based on equality and respect. That it was never too late to choose your own path, to refuse the life others demanded you live. And that sometimes, the most terrifying decisions led to the most beautiful outcomes. Sarah and Adam's story did not end with their deaths. It continued in every descendant who chose love over convenience, in every child who was taught to respect themselves and others, in every person who heard their story and decided to be a little braver, a little more true to their own heart. Their love had been the foundation of a family, but it had also been the beginning of a legacy that would endure as long as there were people who believed that kindness mattered, that courage was rewarded, and that real love could conquer anything. And so the story ended where it had begun, with a choice. Sarah had chosen to run, to trust a stranger, to risk everything for the chance at freedom. Adam had chosen to help her, to love her, to build a life with her. And together, they had chosen each other, over and over again, for more than 40 years. It was a simple story in many ways, the story of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful together. But it was also a profound one, a reminder that the choices we make in moments of crisis can shape not just our own lives but the lives of generations to come. That love is not just a feeling but an action, a commitment, a daily decision to see and value and cherish another person. The storm that had driven them together had long since passed, but the love it had brought into being weathered every storm that followed, growing stronger and deeper with each challenge they faced together. And in the end, that was the truest measure of their success. Not the money or the land or the children, precious as all those things were, but the simple, profound fact that they had loved each other well, and that love had made all the difference.